Hey guys, I'm Chris,
And I'm Mike.
and welcome back to this week's No Limits, the Scot Harvath podcast. What's new today, Mike?
It's full black and it's full summer break, and the two things go together oh so well. So I'm glad to be back here on the podcast. Feels like it's been a while, does it not?
Yeah, what we did Chris Howdy's last one, the last time we talked. Took a couple weeks off, and now we're back. We're about to we're gonna hit a busy stretch here in a minute.
Yeah. Before we started recording, I meant to ask you about our upcoming schedule. So maybe offline we'll talk, and then hopefully this week post our remaining 2023 reading and podcast schedule. And we've got a lot of books, a lot of new releases coming. So
Yes.
let's finalize that list tonight so we can let the people know what's coming the next 6 months or so.
I agree. Before we get into today's book, we forgot to do in the last time we were on this feed, the Scot Harvath podcast, we forgot to do a little patron giveaway.
That's right.
What do we have to give away, Mike?
Man, we love our patrons and we have some autographed books. And unfortunately, people, I'm keeping my copy of Full Black. I love this book. So I have one signed copy of Full Black. Not going to give that away. But let's go back to last month. I've got the Athena Project. I love that one too, but I'm willing to part with it. So we're going to spin that wheel for our patrons. And if you don't know about our Patreon, you can hit thrillerpod.com, click the Patreon tab, learn how you can help support the podcast, all for less than the price of a novel a month. You can be the reason that we can make more podcasts. So head to thrillerpod.com to check that out. But let me spin that wheel and see who the lucky winner of a Brad Thor signed copy of the Athena Project goes to. Dawn. We love Dawn. Dawn wins another one.
Congrats to you, Dawn.
Dawn and Sherry are the OGs. we love them.
Yes, I know. Speaking of OGs, we got to get a group Patreon account. We have some juicy gossip to talk about, especially the last Brad Thor novel, not Brad Thor, the last Jack Carr novel, the last Chris Howdy novel. So just some things you could be a part of if you join our Patreon.
Yeah, we have semi-regularly group chats, group Zoom hangouts, but we have very regular group chats on the Group Me app. So an actual text thread where we're constantly talking about what we're reading and what we think of these books, dropping bombshells on there, uncovering some dirt in the Thrillerverse. So it's a spicy chat, and we'd love to have you on there. If you're a patron, we'll send you that invite. But Chris, today is about Scot Harvath. And I got to ask you, what did you think of this book? Because I have something big I'm about to say, but I want to get your just quick, 30,000 foot view of this book.
I really enjoyed it. It's probably not my favorite, but it's a pretty good one. I don't know. There's some nitpicky things that I found annoying, but I'm guessing from your face that this one ranks very high for you.
I think over the course of this discussion, we're going to see if this is my favorite Brad Thor book yet.
Wow. Okay. All right. We knew this one was coming, and I feel like this is one of those ones where when for me at least, when I know the plot, I get like less excited on reread. But I remember reading this the first time, and I was like, I was fully gripped. So maybe I once we talk it through, I'm sure my score is going to go up, and I'll be right there with you.
Yeah, I think I'm a prisoner of the moment, though, because obviously you can't beat Lions. I really can't see it taking down Lions in the end. Even Lions with its flaws, it's just a classic. Then we loved books like Takedown.
Right, Takedown, big one.
Yeah, The Apostle, maybe?
We like The Apostle. We even we didn't mind Foreign Influence, right? The 2-book arc that this one is completed, right?
Yeah, that's true. And I think what I like so much about this one was that we were going back to the cliffhanger at Foreign Influence.
Yeah.
Really felt like it was Brad Thor's wheelhouse. This was like classic Brad. So combine that, we had a 2-book arc with a cliffhanger that we were just chomping at the bit to get back to. And that involves Robert Ashford, which I'm so glad to see. He's a main player here. But it's also quintessential Brad. I think it's kicking off what we consider like the core of Brad Thor, which is the Carlton group. We got Reed
Right.
Carlton and the Troll in full swing, like full action. When they come in, and I got to be honest, the first maybe third of the book was very light on Scott, the old man, and the Troll. But when they come in, that's when this book gets spicy. And we're talking usually like a race to the finish, which is the last few chapters or maybe 50 pages. I feel like this book is a race to the finish at the halfway point. Like the whole
Right.
second half is just a sprint.
No, and it almost has that. You know, like a lot of thriller novels, they threaten, or even like movies, TV shows, they'll threaten like the attack. Not that I want to see an attack, but the good guy always ends up like winning in the end. And in this case, Brad Scott wins in the end, but there's stakes,
Yes.
and I like my stuff to have stakes. I like I've just recently I've started watching Secret Invasion, and like that show is like there's no stakes to it. They wouldn't kill off, secretly say that Tony Stark was a Skrull. Anyways, I'm going off into my Disney tangent, but you know, for things to have stake, it gives them a little more weight, it gives a little more oomph. It makes you feel more connected, and I don't know, brings the story to life a little bit more. So this one, to me, the plot has stakes. We see those stakes unfold on the page, and like you said, pretty much once we get Scott out of Sweden,
Yes.
the botched like Uppsala like infiltration, we're game on in
Yeah.
terms of the plot. Scott going here, going there, teaming up with the Carlton group, going forward, and I love that stuff. So,
Dude, you nailed it. That op was really drawn out in the beginning and ends up being really kind of cool how it plays out. It almost felt a little Flynnian at times, especially the undercover stuff.
this book has like I didn't want to say it, but now you said it, like I'm going to say it. It feels like a Vince Lynn novel
Yeah.
to in a sense.
I
Like
think
that, the beginning is very long, one op that's drawn out, intercut with like other
exactly.
things
The
that are
villains.
happening at the same time.
Right.
And then once we finish that op, we hit that turning point where we're going to race to the climax and figure out like what's going on. It reminds
Yes.
me of like Consent to Kill is like this, right?
Yes.
As soon as Anna dies, boom, we're on a race to like figure that out.
Yep. And the villains, though.
Even
The villains are
right,
very Flynnian
exactly.
too. Like
Yes,
what's his name? Hank Clark talking with Congressman Rudin. I feel like Ashford and Standing,
or like that. Yeah, yeah.
they almost rise to that level. Not quite, right? I wouldn't say that at all, but it had, it like poetry. It rhymed with Vince Flynn so well. And unfortunately, maybe another reason I like this is that there's a quintessential Thorism that is not present. This sci-fi or fantasy or even historical bizarre fiction. Like
Yeah, no, that was not here at all, really.
there was almost none of it. And while I liked it in Athena Project, we just came off talking about that, some of the crazy quantum transportation stuff. All right, it was cool, and you were okay in that fantasy world. And in the past, we've ridiculed the Thomas Jefferson and the Hidden Clocks, Barbary Coast pirates, and I like the history, but
Hannibal.
Hannibal, right? The storyline of the Muslim killer. But I really liked here how it's a shift from that to geopolitics. Whether it's the Chinese running Site 243 or whatever it was, planning this, what they call it, unrestricted warfare against us.
Right.
And the Chinese are secretly fueling an extremist movement as a plan to bring down America, but we're doing it to ourselves because it's a billionaire and one of our best friends in terms of intelligence sharing, the British, who has a mole doing this. I felt like that was a much more gripping way to involve real world connections than trying to do a historical tidbit that could be really cool, but could also end up flat on its face. And it's happened both ways. Brad's pulled that off fantastically and it's been wonderful. Then there's been some that didn't work as well. And I feel like this book, is ripping up that script and instead playing Brad Thor's geopolitical game, which we know is going to be a through, a through line for the rest of his books. That now I would say is what defines him the most. Look at Black Ice. Look at Rising Tiger. He's leaned into that so hard, and it's become basically the last decade of what he's been doing so well. And maybe that took maybe it was growing pains, right? To get away from that fantasy, historical fantasy kind of bent and get to something like this.
Yeah, because I'm just thinking now we've read three and a half books that had whatever you want to call it, National Treasure, Dan Brown esque
Right.
style story writing to it, and besides Athena Project, I think the three others are not, they're either in the bottom or like the bottom mid level. The ones that rise to the top are the ones that stick to this formula. I'm thinking State of the Union, Takedown,
They're grounded.
yeah, Lions, like you
Yes.
said, Black Ice, stuff like that. So yeah, I think that he does geopolitics so well. But you can't blame a writer for wanting to branch out, try new things. I gotta give him that kind of credit. Some of the my least favorite Vince Flynn novels were it was just a boring spy novel. At least you get like some jazz it up.
Yeah. Or driving through the countryside in Iowa in a camper forever. What book was that? Pursuit of Honor?
Yeah, that was that one.
Ouch.
What was the one we really didn't like? Oh, when he goes to the Philippines. Yeah,
Oh,
and he gets like shot in the butt, and Anna's just being like so annoying.
yeah. Executive Power, maybe? But that was also a change, right? So the way the Uppsala operation takes up the first half of this book, and then there's a
That's how the
clear cut.
Philippines is.
That's
Yeah,
how the Philippines is in the Vince Flynn book when he's in the jungle. But then something changes, and you get, Mitch back in the States, or you get Scott back, going to the Carlton Group headquarters. Once you do that, and you bring the troll in with his intel gathering side of things, the book just blows up, and it just runs. All right, well, I'm glad you gave me that overview, but I think we should dig right in. We should get into some of the scene by scene. However, a way to summarize everything we've been saying is that it's a perfect time for a double limerick.
double limerick. Okay.
It's been a while for a double, and I like this book. I had a lot to say. So here we go. There once was a jackass named Standing. His plan with Rob Ashford not landing. Chase undercover is key. Luke Ralston, what a G. Read Carlton's presence so commanding. Back with Scott, the old man, and the troll. Damn right, ready to rock and roll. Going full black, the heat, it is packed. The Shakes network, they will unroll.
Mm.
I absolutely loved how last book we were strung along that there's some big bad mastermind. And then boom, this book opens and we get a hint of maybe there's something fishy going on. I didn't even catch it, but in the very beginning, Standing is sending emails as the Shake, and he's the one pulling the strings.
Right. Right. Yeah. No. The opening of this book is great. I think jumping, like we said, jumping back and forth between these three plot lines. So we kind of have touched on the Uppsala a little bit. We're going to get more into that. We'll touch on James Standing, who you think, both of me and you think he is. Do you want to start with like my least favorite storyline, the LA plot? Not that it's like awful. It's just like out of the three, if I had to pick my least favorite one, that would be it.
I think pieces of it, I would agree with you. So yeah, I'm good to get it out of the way. I do have to say, I think it satisfactorily combines with what Scott and team are doing.
Yeah, no, and actually it ties everything together pretty well. And I was wondering, how you obviously know somehow these are going to connect.
Mhm.
And you don't know if it's going to be like, what was that one book where it was a couple books ago where you have the police officer and like the police officer never actually like even talks to Scott. She discovers that the president and like gets him to resign, and that's like the president. Scott finds out the president resigns. What that's the through line there. Is it going to be something like that where Scott never has an interaction with them, or something like this where I didn't even think as soon as they mentioned that the guy that they ended up going to was an ex-SEAL. That maybe Scott knows him, and that was good. But I thought that, like, this whole thing paid off, and it
Yes.
wasn't too cheesy. It wasn't too
Yes.
coincidental. I mean, a story's got to get resolved somehow, and this is
Mhm.
one of the least, cop out kind of ways,
Yes.
if that
And
makes
and
sense.
I'll agree, that's the part that worked because that friend is Hank McBride. And it totally makes sense that Luke Ralston, a Delta guy who's consulting on Hollywood, you know, would know and have in his network, and it's actually the safe house where they go to hide out is Hank McBride, who has
Have
this
we met
old.
Hank McBride before?
I was trying to figure out if we met him.
The name sounds so familiar.
It sounds so familiar, and then when he calls Scott, it made perfect sense because Scott's like, he was an uncle to me. He knew my dad in the teams, and they were buddies. I grew up around this guy. So it felt so natural that we must have had him before. I think I'll plan on going back and Googling his name and seeing which books he comes up in.
Okay.
We had to because it worked so perfectly, but I didn't know. So it felt natural when he called Scott. So it didn't feel cheap that these two plots would overlap. And I love the payoff there. However, and he actually has all the evidence to take down Ashford. And how cool was that phone call, dude? When he's like, I think there's a mole in MI5. And Scott's like,
Right.
I'm too busy for this. Like, they're trying to blow up airports. I'm in LAX. Like, you see what's on the news, or the movie theaters, I think, just exploded. And he's like,
Right.
dude, this is too
No,
much.
he had just gotten the leader from LAX.
Yeah. And they just captured him. Right. He got him in that like parking garage. And so he's like, I don't have time for this. But the guy's like, well, let me just tell you the name of who I think the mole is. And you can look into it later. It's Robert Ashford. And Scott just pauses.
What?
He was just working with him last book. And Reed Carlton and him, last book, we were fully bought into their friendship. I mean, the nickname Peaches and everything,
Right.
like that was just last book. And we ended that book with a huge cliffhanger where Ashford shoots the RPG. So Scott and the old man and the Americans don't get Aziz Alim, the head terrorist,
Right.
because he would talk. And Ashford knows they'd get him singing. So they blow up the car he's in. I'm assuming Chase was injured in that, but Chase is back in play here. So anyway, I just love how it came together. I think you're right, though. The weakest part of that storyline is the part about his girlfriend, Luke Ralston's girlfriend, druggie. The dad is connected to the Russian mob
Yeah.
somehow.
That was where it, like, lost me. I didn't
Yeah.
mind the fact that it was, they put him in Hollywood. He's obviously it makes sense. He would use his degree or use his expertise to, that's fully plausible. The fact that I think it was cool that the whole takedown, him taking out the Spetsnaz soldiers.
Yes.
Also, I want to ask you this. Okay, this drives me a little crazy.
Spitznaz.
Do normal people know the Spetsnaz?
I would say so. I definitely
Yeah, you
think
think
so.
so? Well, so I shouldn't ask you because you read these books, and, like, so obviously these books talk about them.
I think if I haven't watched as many books and movies, though, maybe you're right that I wouldn't.
Because sometimes they throw, and it's not just Brad. It's like we just were reading Haley Chill. Like they were talking about Spetsnaz there, and, like, they were just every single, my grandma was throwing around the word Spetsnaz, and I was like, they okay, sure. But
But he
anyways,
called himself on it because he put in that one line where they meet with the Russian dude. Was it Yatsko or something? And he even
the
says,
guy was like, "Do you think everyone that looks like Russian is a Spetsnaz?" Yeah, I like that.
he's like, you Americans, you all just say it's Spetsnaz whenever it's a Russian, killer or assassin. He even says, like, you guys get so high on that. And then Ralston is like, I served with them. Like, I actually have time in the field with Spetsnaz guys. So yeah, I'm pretty sure it was him. Oh, and then the tattoo.
Right, he knows the blood tattoo. Yeah.
Exactly, their blood type. They get it tattooed. And so that's when the Russian dude was like, okay, he's for real. He knows what he's talking about. So yeah, I hear you, but I'm kind of glad Brad called that out because you're right. It could be a trope.
What did you think of that scene in terms of the car and being in this like almost fake panic room. Like I was like, oh, he's in a panic room, but yet the guy can get through the drywall.
Yeah.
And then Ralston, intriguing character. I don't think we ever see him again, but I wouldn't mind having him come back as a side character.
I think he was great. I think as that kind of one-off side character, he was really good. And the way he saw the tire tracks outside Solomon, the movie producer's house, he knew to double back. He rammed the guy, turning his headlights on and off, to screw with his night vision.
That was pretty cool. Yeah.
I thought that was really well done. He entered the house. He got Solomon out of the safe room. There's even that one little line about California's gun laws. That's why Ralston was unarmed. But Solomon had taken some as movie props, or that was his excuse if ever caught. He would say, "Oh, I didn't know it was live. I just took it as a movie prop." Yeah, I thought that was a really cool scene. And it's not the opening scene, which I think we should get to next, but it is one of the very early action scenes. So, no, I liked moving through the house, Solomon in the safe room. He's got the shotgun. I think it proved the bona fides of Ralston as this Hollywood. You almost think of him like what Jack Carr's doing on his own show. He's this like, what would you call it? A consultant, military consultant, right? And half stuntman, half consultant to make sure in Hollywood that they're getting, special operations and military tactics correct. I think that's really cool to have a character like that, but who also is right back in the game when called upon. So I think Luke was really great. Yes, we can quibble over the family connections to his druggy ex-girlfriend who passed away.
Yeah, that whole storyline went on.
Yeah.
It felt like forever, but I know it was probably only one chapter, but just, I don't know.
It dragged.
Maybe call me an asshole, but it felt like it dragged.
It dragged. I'll be honest. If that was cleaned up and or eliminated, I would say this is very nearly a perfect thriller.
Novel.
Yeah, I would say it's up there. What's cool, I did listen to the full version. Then since we pushed this recording back a few days, I actually went back and listened to the abridged audiobook.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And it cut all of that stuff out.
Really?
Yeah. I know I'm on record and stand by saying an abridged version of a thriller is a terrible idea. And I will vouch for that 90% of the time. But I just think Brad Thor's style, sometimes, if you've already read the book, the abridged version is a really nice way to go back to it
and reread
and get the highlights, right? Because reading this book in the abridged version, which was a 6-hour audiobook, I put it on triple speed, was done in the afternoon doing some laundry. Nice. I thought it was really effective because some of the stuff like that little storyline get almost entirely nixed, and we are just action to action to action, and I was having a great time. So,
all right, cool. Yeah, you mentioned earlier that actually is not the first scene. The first thing we get is we actually see Scott in the first scene.
Right.
We don't know it's him until like the very end. It's these two a man and a woman, doing this operation, taking out a car, killing two people, capturing a prisoner, and then finally we get the reveal that it's Scot Harvath with Riley Turner. But I wanted to ask you, sort of as a follow up to, in conjunction to this, how do you feel about? I guess you already said it, but how do you feel about the continuation of Foreign Influence? Like, did you like how that?
Perfect.
This is a complete follow up. Yeah,
it was absolutely perfect, especially because we had the Athena project in between, and I'm wondering, we were saying the amalgam, this group which seemed to be behind the action of the Athena project.
Yeah, that's what I thought it was going to be.
I was like, are we coming back to them? And we even said, I think we're going to come back to them.
We went back to something like it, right?
Something similar, right? But instead, it was the cliffhanger of Foreign Influence, the book before. Right. And I really like that because in Athena Project, Scott, at one point when he shows up, is like, I've got this other stuff going on. He was very clearly like not down to fully do what Athena was doing. He had to move on. He helped with the Bianchi op in Venice, but then he had to go out, on another whatever he was doing. Well, I think that's related to this, getting Chase undercover in the Uppsala op by faking this car crash, pulling out Mansour. And what's cool is Mansour Alim is, what is he, the nephew of Aziz Alim, the big bad?
The nephew, yeah, of the last book, yeah.
And he's more modern. So he was a tech kid that Aziz Alim, the one that Ashford blew up as the cliffhanger of Foreign Influence, they're going to replace him with Chase because not too many people know that Aziz called him in to handle his tech stuff, and very few people in the actual
Know what he
terrorist
looks like.
cell,
Yeah.
they know what he looks like. You're right. And Chase is half Egyptian. People can't tell if he's Arab or French or whatever. And so he's the perfect guy, right? He's going to fit in. He knows the prayer routines as if he's, a Muslim practitioner. He knows the language perfectly. He's just the guy for the job. So if you combine Luke Ralston doing what he's doing in the Solomon LA plot line and Chase undercover working with Scott, then you got Riley. I love the B-level characters here. I love the B-roll. This is a fantastic group of secondary characters.
Yeah, no, Sean Chase is a very intriguing character, and he's obviously not still around, but I hope we see him in the next couple books. But I don't know how. He's CIA, so how much interaction going forward does Scott have with the agency being part of the Carlton Group? So we'll see.
So here's a question for you. We basically have this whole chase scene, and then even when he's embedded in the terrorist network, and he's actually some cool tradecraft, some spy tradecraft I want to talk about while he's undercover.
With the blinds?
The blinds and everything. That might be one, I didn't even think of this, full black. I know Scott says it later at like maybe the 3/4 part of the book, but I think it can apply to Chase as well. He's kind of going full black himself. He has no communications with anybody.
Yeah.
I really think it's cool that you could apply the title in both ways. But that does get to a question I want to ask. Did you feel early on in the book that this isn't even a Scot Harvath book? I mean, whether it's Luke Ralston doing what he's doing or Chase undercover, we're with him so early on. Yes, Scott was in the opening scene. Love the continuation from previous books, and we see him right off the bat. He kind of goes away for a little while. I asked myself, like a third to a halfway through this book, is this even a Scot Harvath book? And the ending, I definitely say yes.
It is.
Right.
I think it's, and that's another thing that we've seen with Vince is sometimes he puts Mitch away for a little bit to let everything else grow and build, and then brings him back, and then Mitch is full center, So we get like one chapter, but then we get like 3 without ever seeing Scott again, and that's not normally. It's normally like 1-to-1,
Yeah.
or back to back to back. But then, look, once we make that turn, it's like Scott full on. We're just with him. So, but yeah, I would agree. It was interesting, and that's why when I'm reading the first half, or listening to the first half, I was like, this book has a different feel in the beginning.
Yes, and I was enjoying that feel because the stories and scenes were pretty cool. But I was wondering, Scott, Nicholas, where are these people? Like, what are they doing?
It's also like when we do see Scott, he's like interrogating Mansoor, and he's just with Riley and some other people that we don't even, appreciate or know. So
right,
it's not like he's with his normal cast of characters in his normal element.
Though, let's talk about that. What he's doing with Riley and Mansoor, who they just picked up in Sweden
with the tasers,
dude. Yeah. All right, you're a doctor. Your wife is, a medical practitioner.
I'm not that kind of doctor.
Do you think you could do it? Did you buy it? Do you think it would work?
This is another like coincidence thing that Brad like explains away. Remember, like later on, Riley comes to him and is like, "Well, I didn't think it was going to happen, but apparently, he's had this thing, and that's exactly what he needed." And I was just like, we didn't even need that line. It's already ridiculous as fuck that he's, pardon my French, that he's using a taser and an adrenaline shot. It's like some stuff out of, what was that movie, Crank? Where like if the guy's like heart rate went down, like the bomb inside of him was going to explode or something like that. So he had to like do like crazy things, like take shots of adrenaline and tase himself.
Jeez.
Yeah, Jason Statham. Interesting movie.
Well, that's kind of like what was the Power book? Total Power, with the wristwatch that is tied to his heartbeat.
Yeah. So I mean, it was a cool scene. Like, do I believe it? No, but cool scene.
But it didn't take away. Like I was, and Scott starts raging. Like he does it once, it didn't work. It's like, prep him again. Riley's like, it's not going to work, guys. Like, prep him again. Boom, double tasers to the chest. Didn't work. And he just goes ham. He just gets like, what does he do? Like 8 or 9 times with these tasers trying
Yeah.
to defibrillate the guy? Like, he was rage tasing this dude. And I bought it hook, line, and sinker. I was like, I don't care if it couldn't work in real life. The fact that this is going on is like super cool. So I absolutely loved it. It's
Yeah,
not
me
going to
too.
take away from my buy-in score. I'll put it that way.
All right, there you go. What do you think about the James Standing? We have yet to really talk about him.
Yeah, I like the villains here. I think my favorite part about it is he's manipulating Ashford. He kind of got him bought into his worldview. You know, his idea of the world isn't as smart as us, so we can exercise our power over things to make a better world. You know, it's always this strain of narcissists believing their view is what's best for all of humanity, and therefore they have the right to seize power, to seize money, to seize influence, and use it to basically make decisions on society and people's lives, even if that means mass murdering them. If it's justified in their mind for the right cause, anything goes. So I think I liked him, but my favorite parts were that he was the sheik. He was the one sending messages to the cell leaders. And then also, he was just using the playbook written by the Chinese that
Right.
was stolen at a site 243, which that was a long time ago. What book was that where we saw it get hit?
The opening scene of Foreign Influence. That's what I liked about it. How we opened Foreign Influence with that, and then we never went back to it. And
That's
then we
right.
finally don't fully understand it until about a third of the way through this book. And that was pretty cool.
That was a long-term plant that I loved. And yeah, super cool.
Yeah, it's a little nugget that then is pretty much the basis of the second half of this novel.
Yeah. And I love that the Chinese are behind all this. Like, I think that added another dimension. Even they're behind the, you know, Islamist extremism. Like, that extremism is being manipulated and fueled by a Chinese plan to bring down America, right?
Right.
It's not the radicals wanting to bring down America. How many times has that been done before? But it's someone even manipulating them in order to do a grander master plan. And I thought that was really scary. And by the way, I don't know why it wasn't in the regular audiobook, but the abridged audiobook opened with an interview. Did you hear this between Brad and Armand Schultz?
Oh, it's at the very end of the full audiobook.
It was at the end. Okay, I didn't hear it at the
Yeah,
end
yeah.
there. For some reason, they put it at the front of the abridged one. And it was really cool because Brad says it was a real report, a white paper that he dug up.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
He wouldn't mention which government wrote it, but a powerful government authorized an investigation into how can you bring down the United States, realizing you can't beat it in the battlefield or on a battlefront. And we needed unrestricted warfare, another means to manipulate our social, economic, political life from within and without this grand master plan. And the fact that Brad read that and is able to have James Standing be the mastermind, narcissist, crazy person behind it all, combined with you add Robert Ashford, he has a mole in MI5 who we're intelligence sharing with, even outside government channels. He literally is getting the Carlton group duped. Dude duped Reed Carlton. Like,
Right.
that's big.
Right.
He's a good villain.
Yeah. No, it's crazy.
Rant over.
Yeah, no, I think the plot, like like the plot of this novel is rock solid. Like
Yes.
just coming up with this idea, and I think in that same interview, did you catch how he talked to And it's funny that we talked about, doing some Dan Brown stuff. So he obviously is friends with Dan Brown, or at least has had conversations with him.
Right.
And Dan Brown is the kind of person that literally will super outline. And Brad said he tried to do that, and he just found himself, he wasn't thrilled, he wasn't surprised, he wasn't excited, and therefore his novel just fell flat. So therefore, the less he outlined, the more surprised he was, which led to, better writing and stuff like that, instead of like, knowing exactly what was going to happen. So I feel like in this case, yeah, there's like a lot of intricacies in terms of you have to nail down the full grand plan of the plot, but you can see like which ways he could have went in different directions, and he's sort of like, all right, I'm digging this, I'm going to go here, I'm digging this, I'm going to go there. Yeah, no, I think, and that's fully encompassing it with, bringing back to this Chinese plot, bringing in this George Soros, right wing conspiracy theory guy in James Standing. I thought that was really cool. So
I'll agree, and I like that part of the interview. He was saying, like, if your heart is pounding while you're writing the book,
yeah, it's going to be better, right?
it's going to be better, and that's going to make the reader even more suspenseful. If you, as the writer, your fingers are just going on the keyboard, like, what's going to happen next? These characters have agency, can go one way or another. This plot can. What happens if the cop in the movie theater with his family? Really cool cutscene, by the way.
Saves the day.
What if he saves the day? Right. Like, I hate to say it, but what if he profiles this North African guy earlier and actually, through his training, knows the tells of this guy sweating or his nervousness and how he places the backpack? And what if all that training kicked in a split second earlier and he apprehended him before he detonated? Or, my God, the perspective writing, the lady in the airport, we're in the shoes. It's just so thrilling. Yeah. We're in the shoes of someone in that movie theater that's an everyman. It's in every family. 2 kids dressing up, buying extra popcorn with their piggy bank money. Same with the lady in the airport. We know these attacks just happened, and she's in an airport looking around at, certain profiles of people and saying, I wonder if other people think they're terrorists, and I'm not going to be that way. I'm not going to say anything. I'm going to have she's like, I'm going to smile, and they're going to remember my nice smile because all the other Americans and white people give them dirty looks, or apprehensive looks. And it's like, yeah, that's how all of us want to act. We want to make people bright and cheerful, but then they are the terrorists and the bomb goes off. Like, shit. We've all been in these predicaments of like, how do you make that judgment call when you don't want to be wrong? You don't want to be discriminatory. You don't want to have hateful thoughts. But at the same time, you are living in fear, and maybe rightfully so, because I think Scott even says this is almost like 9/11. Thousands of people died in the series of attacks, and he felt like he did after 9/11. So when we're put into the shoes of these people, it's even more identifiable and personable. And that's why when the attacks happen, I think that's bold because, Kyle Mills has even talked about this. He wanted in Total Power to see the attack happen and see what Mitch, Irene, and the president will do. Well, here, the attacks happen. And that's not always the case. Like you said, they save the day. I thought it was really cool and really risky to see the attacks happen, not just from Scott's perspective, but also from these random vignettes of families and people in airports and movie theaters. Great idea. And I think it really relates to what a lot of people are going through.
Yeah, I was gonna piggyback on that. I like the being in a third party viewer who we never see again. Or, I like that perspective,
yes,
especially throughout this book.